Stop everything you're doing right now. What you're about to hear will either change your life forever, or you'll spend the rest of your days wondering what could have been if you had truly listened. This isn't just another speech about struggle and hope. This is a blueprint for revolution, delivered by someone who has stared empire in the face and refused to blink. My name is Ibrahim Traore, and I'm speaking to you from Burkina Faso, but my words carry the weight of an entire awakening continent. I've seen governments fall, witnessed the machinery of oppression from the inside, and watched as ordinary people transform themselves into unstoppable forces of change. Today, I'm going to share with you secrets that those in power never wanted you to discover. But first, let me ask you something that will haunt you. What if I told you that everything you've been conditioned to believe about your limitations, your history, and your potential is not just wrong, but deliberately designed to keep you powerless? Brothers and sisters in Black America, I don't speak to you as some distant observer commenting on your struggle from afar. I speak to you as someone who recognizes the identical fire burning in your eyes, the same fire I see in the eyes of every African who has decided that enough is enough. I know this fire because it burns in my chest too, ignited by the same injustices, fueled by the same dreams of true freedom. You might wonder what gives me the authority to address you with such boldness. Let me tell you what I've witnessed. I've seen how global power structures operate when they think no one is watching. I've observed their board meetings, their private communications, their strategic plans that treat entire populations like chess pieces on their game board. I've watched them orchestrate conflicts, manipulate currencies, and orchestrate the rise and fall of leaders across Africa. But more importantly, I've seen what happens when people who have been told they are nothing finally remember they are everything. Our pain may wear different costumes across different continents. Police brutality in your cities, economic colonization in our villages, educational apartheid in your schools, resource theft in our lands. But make no mistake, it flows from the same poisoned well. The oppression, the systematic theft, the calculated humiliation designed to break our spirits, it's all part of one massive, coordinated system that spans the globe. Yet here we stand, unbroken, unbowed, still breathing, still fighting, still creating beauty in the midst of chaos. And this reality, our continued existence, our refusal to disappear, our insistence on thriving despite everything, this is what terrifies them most. But before I continue, I need you to understand something that will reshape everything you thought you knew about power. The greatest weapon they ever used against us wasn't the whip, wasn't the gun, wasn't even the economic policies designed to keep us dependent. The greatest weapon was convincing us that we are separate from each other, that our struggles are individual rather than collective, that our destinies are unconnected. I come to you today with no superiority complex, no condescending attitude, only raw truth delivered with the love of someone who sees you as family. I have spent years studying the games that world powers play, the strategies they use to exploit, divide, and weaken entire populations. I have watched from the inside as they perfect the art of making the oppressed grateful for their chains. They whisper constantly in your ears through their media, their educational systems, their cultural institutions that you are powerless. They have created an entire industry dedicated to convincing you that you must beg for scraps at tables you helped build with your blood, sweat, and genius. They want you to see yourself as eternal victims, dependent on their mercy, their systems, their validation for your very sense of worth. But I'm here to obliterate that illusion with the force of undeniable truth. You are not beggars, and you never were. You are the builders of architectural marvels that modern engineers study but cannot replicate. You are warriors whose military strategies are analyzed in academies worldwide because of their brilliance and effectiveness. You are thinkers whose philosophical frameworks shape the moral foundations of civilizations across multiple continents. You are creators whose innovations in science, mathematics, medicine, and technology they have systematically claimed as their own for centuries. You are the people who gave birth to human civilization itself when others were still learning to make fire consistently. Your history doesn't just echo across continents. It reverberates through every major advancement in human knowledge and culture. We have watched you march through the streets of Birmingham with a dignity so profound it shamed the most hardened segregationists. We witnessed you organize in Montgomery, transforming a simple bus boycott into a masterclass in economic warfare that brought the entire system to its knees. We've seen you shout down injustice from Selma to Ferguson, from Watts to Baltimore, each time creating ripple effects that inspired liberation movements from Soweto to São Paulo, from London to Lagos. We watched you build universities when they denied you education, create businesses when they excluded you from theirs, establish churches when they barred you from worship, form communities when they tried to scatter you to the winds. You literally built nations from nothing, took scraps, and created empires of culture that now influence every corner of the globe. They gave you pain, and you transformed it into jazz that moves souls across all racial lines. They gave you limitation, and you created blues that speaks to universal human experience. They gave you exclusion, and you built hip-hop that became the most influential cultural force of the modern era. They gave you broken communities, and you created movements that changed laws, shifted consciousness, and inspired oppressed people worldwide to stand up and demand their dignity. But here's what they desperately hope you never figure out. The fight is not over. In fact, it has evolved into something far more subtle and dangerous than anything your ancestors faced. The enemy has simply learned new tactics, developed more sophisticated weapons. Where they once used physical chains, they now use psychological programming. Where they once relied on legal segregation, they now employ economic policies that achieve the same results. Where they once burned crosses to terrorize you, they now program algorithms to limit your opportunities and amplify negative stereotypes about your communities. They have mastered the art of oppression through deception so subtle you don't recognize it as oppression. They create distraction so entertaining you forget what you should be focused on. They manufacture confusion so complete you begin to question your own lived experiences and inherited wisdom. And here's the key to understanding everything that happens in global politics, economics, and social policy. They fear unity among people who know their true worth more than they fear any army, any nuclear weapon, any natural disaster. They have contingency plans for economic collapse, for climate change, for pandemics, for wars between nations. But they have no effective defense against the unity of conscious people who understand their collective power and decide to use it strategically. They fear specifically when black voices in America connect with their family in Africa. They panic when you link hands with your relatives in Jamaica, in Brazil, in London, in Paris. They deploy massive resources to prevent you from looking past the artificial borders they drew on maps and seeing the truth that we are one people, scattered by historical forces but never truly lost to each other. Divided, we are manageable. Separate, we can be controlled, manipulated, played against each other. But united, truly united in purpose and action, we become a storm that no force on earth can withstand or redirect. Now listen carefully, because this next truth will fundamentally alter how you see yourself. You are not just Americans who happen to have dark skin. That limiting identity serves their purposes because it keeps you isolated, makes you think your struggle is purely domestic, convinces you that you're alone in this fight against systems designed to exploit you. You are sons and daughters of a stolen continent, carriers of bloodlines that connect you to the most advanced civilizations in human history. That blood flowing through your veins right now carries the genetic memory of kingdoms that ruled when Europe was emerging from what they accurately call the Dark Ages. That spirit residing in your chest is literally unbreakable because it has survived and thrived through experiences that would have destroyed any other people in human history. Never, and I cannot emphasize this strongly enough, never allow anyone to reduce you to statistics on their research reports, to stereotypes in their media representations, to silence in their decision-making processes. You were not born to merely survive the systems they created to limit you. Survival was never the ultimate goal. You were born to lead transformations, to build institutions that reflect your values, to reclaim not only what was taken from you personally, but what was stolen from your children and all the generations yet to come. The time has arrived, not next year, not after the next election, not when conditions become more favorable. The time is now to remember who you really are. Not just the sanitized versions they allowed you to learn in schools designed to produce compliant workers rather than critical thinkers. Not just the limited narratives they permitted in history books written by people who never experienced your reality. I'm talking about what your ancestors whispered to each other in the darkness of slave ships when they thought no one could hear them. What your great-grandmothers passed down through songs, stories, and sayings that seemed simple but carried profound wisdom. What your hearts have always known, but your minds have been systematically trained to doubt through centuries of psychological warfare. We in Africa, and yes, I said your Africa, because that's exactly what it is. We are not sitting here passively waiting to be rescued by anyone. That narrative of the helpless continent dependent on foreign charity is one of the most successful lies ever told, designed specifically to justify continued exploitation while making the exploiters feel virtuous about their theft. But we are also not content to walk this path toward liberation alone anymore. We understand that our struggle and your struggle are not parallel fights happening in different locations. They are the same fight against the same global system, and that fight can only be won through coordinated action across all theaters of operation. We are rising economically, technologically, politically, culturally, and we are extending an invitation that has never been offered in human history. Not for charity, not for pity, not for the kind of foreign aid that comes with strings attached and interests that contradict our own. We are calling for unity based on shared blood, shared history, shared interests, and shared destiny. We are calling for the kind of strength that emerges when family members who have been separated by force finally reunite with full awareness of their connection and their collective power. We call you not as allies in some abstract political movement, but as family returning to claim your inheritance. There is land here, millions of acres of the most fertile soil on earth, land that could feed continents if properly developed. There is work here, meaningful work that builds rather than destroys, that creates wealth for our communities rather than extracting it for distant shareholders. There is future here, a future where your children won't have to navigate hostile educational systems designed to convince them they are intellectually inferior, where their names won't be automatically rejected by employers who make assumptions based on pronunciation and cultural origin, where their natural hair won't be considered unprofessional, where their skin will be a source of pride connecting them to greatness rather than a target for discrimination. But most importantly, there is healing here, deep generational healing from wounds so profound they have been passed down through DNA. Trauma so systematic, it has shaped entire communities' responses to authority, relationships, education, and economic opportunity. Come not as tourists seeking authentic experiences to post on social media, not as missionaries bringing salvation to people you've been programmed to see as less fortunate, not as investors looking for cheap labor and exploitable resources. Come as builders ready to plant seeds that will grow into forests your great-grandchildren will rest under. Come as family members ready to contribute your skills, knowledge, and resources to the collective liberation of our people worldwide. Think beyond the artificial limitations of passports and currencies, beyond the mental prison of national boundaries created by people who never had our interests at heart. Think in terms of legacy, what you will leave for children not yet born, who deserve a world where their intelligence is assumed rather than questioned, where their beauty is celebrated rather than debated, where their potential is limitless rather than predetermined by zip codes and melanin content. The world is shifting beneath our feet right now. The empire that has dominated global politics and economics for centuries is showing cracks that are becoming impossible to hide. Old power structures are failing. Traditional alliances are crumbling. Economic systems that seemed permanent are proving fragile. In this moment of unprecedented global transition, those who know who they are, who understand their history and their power, must step forward to lead the way toward whatever comes next. We will not spend another generation begging to be included at tables where we are unwelcome. We will not waste our energy trying to reform systems that were specifically designed to exclude us. We will not continue to seek validation from people who profit from our self-doubt. Instead, we will build our own tables, establish our own institutions, create our own systems of justice, education, and economic development that serve our interests and reflect our values. The time is now. The opportunity is unprecedented. The call is real and urgent. And the question that will define not just your individual life, but the trajectory of our people for generations to come is simple. Will you answer? But let me explain why this moment is different from every other moment in our history, why the stakes have never been higher, and why your response to this call will determine whether your descendants inherit freedom or more sophisticated forms of slavery. Across every continent where our people have been scattered, we have faced not just centuries of injustice, but systematic campaigns designed to erase us from history, from consciousness, from the future itself. Whether in the cotton fields of Georgia, where your ancestors' unpaid labor built American capitalism, or in the diamond mines of Sierra Leone, where African hands extracted wealth that built European cities, or in the gold mines of South Africa, where apartheid perfected the art of legal oppression, our people have been the engine of global economic development while being denied any share in the prosperity we created. The forms this oppression takes may appear different depending on geography and political systems. Police brutality in Chicago, debt slavery in Chad, educational apartheid in London, resource theft disguised as development in Nigeria. But strip away the surface differences, examine the underlying structures, and you discover they are all manifestations of the same coordinated global system. This system was not created by accident or historical happenstance. It was not the unintended consequence of cultural misunderstandings or natural economic forces. Every aspect of it was designed with mathematical precision, implemented with deliberate intent, and maintained through constant adaptation and refinement. Here's what you must understand, if you understand nothing else. Slavery was never just about obtaining free labor. If that's all they wanted, they could have used the same indentured servitude systems they employed with poor Europeans. Slavery was about something far more sinister, the complete destruction of identity, the systematic severing of connections between people and their origins, the creation of a class of human beings so disconnected from their cultural foundations that resistance would become psychologically impossible. Colonialism was never just about accessing land and resources. They could have established mutually beneficial trade relationships with African kingdoms, just as they did with powerful Asian empires they couldn't easily conquer. Colonialism was about breaking the spiritual and psychological foundation of entire civilizations, creating dependency so profound that even after political independence, former colonies would continue to serve their former masters' economic interests. Segregation in America was never only about maintaining physical separation between racial groups. If simple avoidance was the goal, they would have supported Back to Africa movements rather than fighting them. Segregation was about creating and maintaining a sense of inferiority so deep it would become self-perpetuating across generations, so that even when legal barriers were removed, psychological barriers would continue to limit what we believe possible for ourselves. And today, right now, in this moment, the economic games they play through international monetary policies, the cultural stereotypes they perpetuate through global media systems, the political manipulations they orchestrate through international organizations and foreign aid programs, all serve the same fundamental purpose they have always served: to make us forget our value, erase our history, and convince us that our power is an illusion. They need us to see ourselves through their lens, to define ourselves according to their limitations, to measure our worth by their standards, to dream only dreams they are comfortable with us achieving. Yet despite 4 centuries of the most sophisticated, well-funded, technologically advanced oppression in human history, despite every resource of every empire being deployed to break our spirits and erase our identity, we are still here. We are still creating. We are still rising. We are still refusing to accept their version of what we can become. That survival, that stubborn, magnificent refusal to disappear, is itself a form of victory they never acknowledged and never celebrated, because acknowledging it would mean admitting that their entire system failed to achieve its ultimate goal. Our ancestors endured the horror of the Middle Passage and still found ways to preserve cultural elements that connect us to our origins today. They survived the brutality of plantation slavery and still created languages, music, stories, and spiritual practices that sustained community across generations. They endured the psychological warfare of Jim Crow and still built institutions, universities, businesses, churches, organizations that educated generations and created foundations for future progress. They survived the economic violence of urban disinvestment, the educational violence of underfunded schools, the medical violence of experimentation and neglect, the legal violence of mass incarceration designed to recreate slavery by other means. And they didn't just survive, they created. They transformed suffering into art so beautiful, it moves people across all cultural and racial lines. They converted struggle into intellectual frameworks that influenced liberation movements worldwide. They turned poverty into innovation, limitation into creativity, exclusion into excellence that could not be ignored or denied. Most importantly, they found each other across impossible distances, creating networks of mutual support that transcended the artificial boundaries colonizers drew on maps to divide us. That is the power they could never take away, no matter how much violence they used, no matter how sophisticated their methods became, no matter how much money they spent on programs designed to convince us we were powerless. It's the power that flows through your bloodstream right now as you hear these words. It's the power that connects you instantly and intimately to people you've never met who share your experiences across continents and cultures. There is a connection so deep, it transcends spoken language between a black child born in Detroit and one born in Dakar, between a young woman organizing for justice in Atlanta and one fighting for dignity in Accra, between a teacher struggling with underfunded schools in Chicago and a farmer fighting for land rights in Burkina Faso, between an entrepreneur building businesses in Brooklyn and an innovator creating solutions in Nairobi. Even when we speak different languages, practice different religions, salute different flags, our stories are intertwined like DNA strands. We carry the same genetic memory of resistance. We share the same inherited wisdom about survival and thriving under impossible circumstances. We possess the same creative genius that transforms obstacles into opportunities. We are descendants of people who looked at systems designed to destroy them and said, "No, we will not be broken. We will not disappear. We will not accept your definition of what we can become." That refusal, that magnificent, stubborn, unbreakable refusal, is coded in our DNA, and it activates whenever we truly connect with each other across the artificial divisions they created to keep us weak. But here's what I need you to understand about this moment in history. Resilience alone is no longer sufficient. Survival, while necessary, cannot be our ultimate goal. We cannot spend another generation simply enduring systems designed to limit us, hoping that if we work hard enough and prove ourselves worthy enough, they will eventually accept us as fully human. We must build, we must create new systems that serve our interests rather than exploit them. We must rise with complete awareness of who we are, where we come from, and what we are capable of achieving when we work together with shared purpose. Our strength is not just emotional or spiritual, though those dimensions are crucial. Our strength is intellectual. We have produced some of the most brilliant minds in every field of human knowledge. Our strength is cultural. We have created forms of artistic expression that shape global consciousness. Our strength is economic. Collectively, we control trillions of dollars in resources and consumer spending power. Our strength is political. We have the numbers and the organization to influence policy at every level of government. Most importantly, our strength is collective. When we work together across artificial boundaries of nationality, class, and ideology, we become capable of achievements that seem impossible when we work as isolated individuals or competing factions. We must begin to act with unity of purpose, with clear strategic intention, and with long-term vision that extends beyond immediate crises to encompass generational transformation. The lies that have kept us divided have served their purpose long enough. The myths that convinced us we had nothing in common with each other have outlived their usefulness to them, not to us. Africa is not separate from Black America, and Black America is not isolated from Africa. The Caribbean is not disconnected from both continents. Black Europeans are not facing fundamentally different challenges. We are one people, scattered by historical forces but connected by shared experiences, shared interests, and shared destiny. Our enemies have always understood this truth. That's why they invest so heavily in keeping us apart, in making us see each other as strangers, in convincing us that our differences are more significant than our similarities. The truth they work so hard to hide is that our shared struggle should no longer be just a source of pain and trauma, but the foundation for the most powerful unity movement in human history, The systems that oppressed us were global in scope, coordinated in implementation, and consistent in purpose across different continents and different time periods. Our response must match their scope, coordination, and consistency. We must reach across oceans, literally and figuratively, and recognize each other as family members who have been separated by violence but never truly lost to each other. We must rebuild connections that were deliberately torn apart, not to return to some romanticized version of the past, but to claim the future that belongs to us. For centuries, we have remained standing in the face of everything they could throw at us. That strength, that incredible, tested, proven strength, must now be transformed into movement, into strategy, into coordinated action that changes the fundamental balance of power in the world. We are not scattered seeds blown randomly by historical winds. We are roots of the same magnificent tree, and the deeper our roots connect beneath the surface, the stronger our branches will grow above ground, the more abundant our fruit will be, the more shade we can provide for future generations. Now I want to address something that goes to the very heart of how you see yourself and your place in the world. We are not here to beg for inclusion in systems that were designed to exclude us. We are not here to wait for approval from people who profit from our self-doubt. We are not here to plead for space at tables where our presence makes others uncomfortable. The time for seeking validation from our oppressors ended long ago. The era of measuring our progress by their standards, celebrating when they acknowledge our humanity as if it were a gift they had the right to give or withhold, accepting their definitions of success as if they understood what success means for people who have faced what we have faced. That era is over. We are not victims. Despite centuries of systematic efforts to convince us that victimhood is our permanent identity, we have been victimized. No honest person can deny that reality. We have suffered injustices that would have destroyed other peoples entirely. But suffering is something that happened to us, not something we are. We are defined not by what was done to us, but by how we responded to what was done to us. We are defined by our refusal to be broken, our insistence on creating beauty in the midst of ugliness, our determination to find joy despite every attempt to crush our spirits. We are defined by our will to overcome circumstances that were specifically designed to be insurmountable.